played, it's what I like to say, it's got a living string, you know, it's a living tradition. It really became important around 500 BC, and so that's the Warring State period of classical China. And you have really important philosophies that came about during that time period because you have all of these different warring states fighting each other, and there's not one unified country yet, right? So of course, the fighters, the people who want to war are going to war with each other, and then the people who like to think will come up with philosophical answers to these problems. How can we solve the war that just keeps happening? And so in this time period, which was a great time period for general thinking and philosophy throughout the world, you have Confucianism and Taoism and Lawism, the 100 schools of thought arise. And this instrument became very important to both Confucianism and Taoism. This instrument has a whole lifestyle built around it now, which is called Qin Dao, Zither Taoism, the way of Gu Qin. And just to, I guess, show how important it became to those types of philosophies, because it's such a quiet instrument. I'll just play a little bit of the harmonics so you guys can hear how quiet this thing is. So you guys hear how calm and meditative those tones are. So someone like me who plays the Gu Qin will use this instrument as a tool to cultivate the mind toward enlightenment. So the goal is to meditate, or to have others who are listening to it meditate with you with the music, and try and clear your mind and just relax, and bring a little bit of peace, you know, as life gets more stressful and hectic as you get older, I suppose. So I'm going to play a little piece for you guys. It's called, it can be translated as The Drunkard, or Liquor Mania, or Wine Madness, and it's kind of a fun, loosey-goosey evening piece. So let's play. times when I played that piece in particular, here a lot of people in America think it sounds like bluegrass music. Do you guys know bluegrass music at all? It's got kind of that twang and the banjo picking types of tunes, but I think that it speaks. One of the things that I really enjoy about that type of feedback from my friends and family and other people I meet here that I play that for is that it speaks to the universal themes that are found in just folk music around the world. So in some of these, weekly lessons, I'm going to try and introduce just more folk music and traditional classical music from all over the world, and sometimes those types of themes are going to be, you'll hear them right away and say, oh yeah, I can kind of see how that sounds kind of like that other country uses a similar scale or things like that. Other times it'll be completely different, but I just wanted to start out with something that was absolutely familiar and relatable. This instrument, there's just so many things that I could talk about. It's one of those instruments where every little bit of it is full of mythology and story. It's so ingrained in the culture. Just everything from what the different parts of the instrument are named. You've got the two sound holes down here, right? And you've got the dragon's pool and the phoenix pond, and these are the phoenix feet, all the way up to the phoenix eye over here, and the tongue. Some of the symbolism that goes into it is, you guys are familiar with the lunar calendar, and you've got the 13 Quay markings here to represent the cycles of the moon. And the bottom board here is flat to represent the earth, and that top board is rounded out to represent the heavens. So there's all sorts of symbolism that goes into it too. Most of the Guqin pieces reflect nature, right? And that's a very Taoist thing, so that makes sense. And perfect conditions for playing an instrument like this are up in the mountains, under the shade of a tree near flowing water. Maybe a good friend who likes to listen or participate, sipping tea, burning incense. These are those very quiet areas where you can be out in nature. Those are the perfect times to play this instrument. So I'll do a little bit more. I'm just going to do some improvisation, but I'm going to do a lot more with the harmonics, so you guys can hear how the harmonics just sit and build inside the instrument. And when you improvise, especially with the harmonics, it's you really want to listen and anticipate how one harmonic is going to play with the other ones, because sometimes they kind of make beats with each other and they'll shimmer, but sometimes they'll stand real strong on top of each other and things like that. you
I
guys?
have my own instrument in my bag. Carry it.
Is it like this?
No, it's just blowing one.
Oh.
Cool. Do you guys have any questions about the instrument, or?
No.
Pretty straightforward.
How old is this instrument?
It's, every source I read is a little bit different. It's hard to say exactly when its moment of creation was. But it was already established by 500 BC, and there are tales and things like that in writings. And obviously the instruments, like, they have instruments from a while back that have survived, but none from 3,000 years ago, 4,000. But it's estimated that it's about 4,000 years old. And there's been two main versions of the instrument. The older way that they built it lasted from 4,000 years ago to about 2,000 years ago, and then there's a transition period, and this version of how it's built is from around 200 AD to 600 AD. That was kind of the period where they'd gotten to this version of it. But one of the great things about this instrument is that every maker puts their own design into it. Some Guchins are really wild in what they'll do with the edges. This is a pretty simple, plain design, but sometimes it's almost like a serrated knife edge. Really cool. Sometimes they have these circular parts of the body that it all affects the sound, and it's very personal for the maker. One of the things that maybe you guys know of an instrument in Korea that does something similarly. They use a very thick lacquer to coat the instrument, right? And that allows for all the sliding that you do. We do so much of it in this music. But as you guys might be able to see, my instrument's very young still, but can you kind of see these cracks in the lacquer that are starting to form? They're going this way. I have snake cracks. There are different lacquers and different woods are going to crack in different ways, and so that's also a really important part of the tradition of this instrument. It's also a way that they are able to date the instruments. And now, the older it is, the more cracks it will have in the lacquer. It helps add to the personality of the instrument too. So that's a really important part of this instrument tradition. Sure.
What is that instrument?
So that's the gujang. Gujang.
Do you guys remember the name of this?
Gujang.
Gujang.
Yeah.
K Kum. Is it? Kumchin. Yeah.
And this is Chinese based?
Both of these are
Both are
Chinese.
Chinese.
But the Guchin traveled over to Korea or somewhere around maybe 200 AD, and the Kumchin, is that how you say it? Kumchin? Yeah, so the Kumchin is a result of the Guchin coming over. But it sounds like at that point maybe a 5-string version coming over. I don't know, how many strings does the Kumchin have? The Kumchin? In Korea. Not this instrument. 12?
This?
Okay.
I'm not sure.
There's another instrument, very much, it's another zither instrument like the gujang that is a little bit older, called the se, and that has 25 strings, and it's no longer used, but a lot of the folk music ends up using the 12 and 13 string versions, which would of the gujang, as opposed to having, that's a 21 string version. So it makes sense for the Mongol or Taiwan to have like 12 or 13 or 14 strings. There's a lot of overlap too between, I don't remember how to say it, is it ak, the traditional court ensemble music. In Japan, it's called gagaku.
아,
Ak, yeah. There's a there's a lot of overlap with like gagaku in Japan borrowing the dance and music court styles from music, which was shared between China and but it's an interesting case study just as far as world music goes, because that still happens in Korea. It still happens as gagaku in Japan, but that particular era of court music no longer exists in China. So the only window that those scholars have to know what that period, that lost period of court music sounded like, is to go to sources the Korean, Japanese iterations of it, because it's still a living, breathing ensemble music. So I think it's just very interesting how much interplay, how connected things are in that.
Okay.
Thanks for listening, guys.
Everyone, thank Teacher Brian.
Thanks.
Thank you.